How's it going, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode of my podcast series called Preparing for the Future. Now, in the first episode, I talked a little bit about myself and gave you guys some information on my background from my work experience. And then in the second episode, we decided to talk about the whole interviewing process, about how there are many different ways that you can have an interview, and my personal experiences using phone interviews, since that's mostly what I have done in the past. For this episode is going to be a little bit different. Today we're going to be talking about, the best way that I can put this is we're going to be talking about hygiene at work. Now, you see, when it comes to work, and I kind of brought this up a little bit in my interviewing podcast, but eventually, with whatever job that you get in the future, wherever you go, you always want to make sure that, you are presenting yourself, in the best way that you can. And even though in the interviewing process, I talked briefly about this, I'm going to talk about it more today with just general hygiene when it comes to being in the workplace. Now, as I said, with whatever job you want to get into or just any job you have in the future, you want to make sure you're presenting yourself very well, because otherwise nobody's going to take you seriously and people will look at you and think, well, you kind of smell a little bit and I don't know if I want to be talking to you. And this could go for any job at all. If you are a teacher, you want to make sure that you are dressed to impress, that your students know that you are here to teach them, but you also want to make sure that, you brush your teeth, you comb your hair, you smell good, all of that good stuff. Because that's what people are going to notice, is that, you're taking care of yourself, so that way, you can take care of the job that you're doing. And that's essentially what it is, When it comes to a job, no matter what job that you get into, you always want to make sure that you're dressed to impress, and you want to make sure you're all nice and clean and ready for the workday. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say that you are a college student. Since this is mostly for college students, I'll use college students as my example. When you guys are getting ready to go to class, you want to make sure that you look good. You want to make sure that, when your professors are looking at you, they know that you mean business and you're ready to tackle the day. And that means this, making sure that, you're dressed nicely, Granted, if you're a college student, depending on the day, sometimes college students wear pajamas to school. And now that I think about it, a lot of college students end up doing that. Whereas, that could be comfortable for you, but since you're in school, let's just stick with the basics, dress to impress, just a regular day. Just make sure that you look nice. So, you're not wearing any ripped jeans or ripped clothing at all. Just make sure it's nice, presentable, tucked in, wearing a belt, all that good stuff. And then the other thing that you want to make sure is that you smell good. You want to make sure that you're going into school or work making sure you smell good, whether that be for the ladies adding in some perfume, or guys making sure we have the deodorant and body spray at the ready. Not necessarily meaning you want to have that. You want to have that as you are going about your day. No. You do not need to have. Well, granted, it could probably be good to have that stuff handy just in case you need it. But back to the main point: deodorant, perfume, anything to make sure you smell good. Next thing would be brushing your teeth. Because one of the most impressive things, and one thing that you can do to really impress somebody, is that smile. And making sure you have clean teeth is a definite plus. Also, another thing, too, for the gentleman is definitely shaving. Now, I'll kind of get a little bit more into this once I go into my personal experience with hygiene at work. But one thing I do have noticed with certain jobs is that you want to make sure you are properly shaven. While you're shaving your face, some jobs actually have certain requirements for how facial hair can be. And I'll get into that a little later, but just as like a basic rule, kind of just make sure that, your facial hair is nice and even, it's nice and presentable, and it doesn't look way too crazy, like if you have a beard. Well, again, depending on your workplace, that could vary from different times. But anyway, next up, make sure you comb your hair. A lot of the times where I've worked outside in the sun, so I've normally buzzed or really cut my hair a lot. But that's because I'm working outside, it's very hot, and I want to make sure that I feel nice and refreshed. But if you do not want to cut your hair, make sure you can, style it, make sure it looks nice, and make sure it, doesn't look like you just got out of bed, because then nobody's going to think you're taking things seriously. But that's essentially because you actually would be quite surprised in how people will react to you if you don't have good hygiene. You don't want to go into that interview after just having a sandwich and having food stuck in your teeth. That's not going to look really good. Or even if you're on the job working, and let's say you forgot to put on deodorant and you've been running around all day. You come up to a customer, they're going to think you smell, and that's probably not going to be good for the business. So that's why it's important to make sure that you're all cleaned up and ready to go, because you'll have a lot more, you'll be in a lot better situations where people will take you seriously, and they know that you really care about your position or job because of the way of how you keep yourself clean and organized. So now let's jump into my personal experience. Now, as you guys know, I've worked, most of my life, I've worked outside jobs. And by outside, it means I have worked outside. Whereas the first job that I ever worked in, I was working at a golf course, and then I was working as a custodian in Disney. But my example that I'm going to use for this is mostly going to be Disney, because at the golf course that I used to work in, our uniform was black shorts with a buttoned-up shirt, tucked in, with the belt and whatnot, and we got to wear a hat. Now, at the golf course, we are able to get away with a little bit more of with hygiene, mostly because, yes, we are working outside, and most of the time, the golfers that were there, they usually really didn't come up to us. So, let's say, you might have accidentally forgot to put on deodorant because you were in a rush. You probably wouldn't have a lot of guest interaction because people are just going to play on the course. And you're mostly running around doing some cleaning up golf carts, taking out the trash, all that good stuff. But I've noticed that at Disney, it's very different. And it's actually a lot more serious than you might think. And here's what I mean by that. At Disney, you are putting on a show. No matter what job that you are doing, you are a character in this world. And here's what I mean by that. Even though during my first program and my second, I was a custodian. In my first program, I worked in Main Street USA in the Magic Kingdom. And for those of you that don't know, Main Street USA is pretty much the entrance of the Magic Kingdom all the way up to the castle. My uniform was white shorts, black shoes, and a white button-up shirt. And sometimes we could wear a red hat that had a custodian on it, which I wore a lot because it helped a lot in the summer. But anyway, since we are this character and Disney is such a big corporation, they actually teach you in training to make sure that you are fitting the Disney look. And that's what they call it. That means wearing the uniform in the correct way, making sure that you are all cleaned up and ready to go, and that you look presentable for when you go out on stage. Because when you actually get to your work location, it is actually called going on stage because you are a character. You are a part of the world, wherever you are. So if I was in Main Street USA, then I'd have to just be a character that cleans up, but I'm also somebody that's very friendly and open, and I look good to try and make sure that the guests coming in, they want to come back. And to elaborate a little bit more further on this, here's what I mean. One, you have to make sure that you are wearing the correct uniform and it looks presentable. So nothing is, your shirt's not tucked out. It's just kind of hanging there. You want to make sure it's tucked in. You can't wear any socks with other brands on it. It has to be Disney brand. And they let you know ahead of time what specifically that means. You want to make sure that if you are not wearing a hat, at least your hair looks presentable. You want to make sure that it at least looks nice. And now let's get back into the topic of facial hair. I mean, obviously, yes, you have to make sure that, you smell good and, you're doing your best. But they're a little bit more lenient on that because since I was a custodian, I was basically dealing with trash and sweeping garbage all day. And I was working out in the sun. So I was able to get a little bit away with that. But it's always important to kind of keep some deodorant and body spray in your locker so you have it. Because, again, when guests comes up to you, you want to make sure you're leaving a good impression. But now let's get back to the facial hair. At Disney, you can only have a specific type of facial hair. I can't remember exactly which kind of facial hair you can necessarily have. But here's what I mean like that. If you have facial hair that doesn't really necessarily grow in the right way, where it just kind of looks like fuzzy and whatnot, your bosses at Disney will kind of do an inspection of you, and if they see that your facial hair isn't a good representation, then they actually will tell you to go downstairs and go shave. They actually have vending machines that have razors, and if you didn't have any shaving cream, then you had to go downstairs and make sure hope to God that the water was hot and you'd have to shave your face. But things have changed over time, so now people can have certain facial hair, and if it's growing in, it's growing in. As long as it doesn't look too bad, it is acceptable. But to kind of start wrapping up this episode, again, no matter where you work, you want to make sure that you look presentable. And also, when you're clean and, you feel good about yourself, you feel like you can tackle anything. And depending on what kind of job you get into, they may have certain rules about how you need to keep yourself looking good. And Disney is definitely one of them. And I can agree with everything they ask of you because, you're a part of a show and you want to make sure that you look presentable. And there were definitely some times where I've had some long days at work where I came the next day, and before I got a haircut, my hair didn't really look too good. So I had to go run downstairs and get a hat, and I had to keep the hat on. It was a little hot and crazy, but you have to make sure that you're looking presentable to the people that you're about to go entertain, no matter what job that you are doing. So keep this in mind. Whatever job or whatever situation where you'll eventually go out and do something with a group of people, it's always best to make sure that you freshen up and look good, because then people will take you seriously and your superiors and bosses will know that you care with whatever it is you're going to do. And that pretty much wraps up this next episode of Preparing for the Future. I hope you guys got a lot of great information about it. This was an interesting podcast to talk about because it really made me think back about my time at Disney because, again, like I said, Disney is very keen on making sure that you look presentable. And if there's anything that may look wrong, they'll go up to you and, they'll tell you kindly. And you just want to make sure that you look and smell good. And that's honestly helped me throughout all my times at work. Because when I went back to Disney for a second time, even though I was at a sporting complex, I still had to, keep the Disney look. So I had everything ready, and I had a locker, and I had lots of backup stuff for deodorant, body spray, all that good stuff to make sure that I was presentable to when the athletes would come in. But that just about wraps up today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.